Alexander Hawthorne's manicured fingers trembled as he folded the medical report, his steel-gray eyes fixed on the London skyline through his penthouse windows. 3 years. That's all the time he had left according to the papers clutched in his hand. Across the room, his half-brother Sebastian's mouth curved into what could almost be mistaken for concern, if not for the calculating gleam in his eyes. That same evening, at the Hawthorne London Charity Gala, waitress Isla Bennett's steady hands betrayed her when she locked eyes with Alexander, sending a cascade of red wine down his immaculate suit. Neither could have predicted how this collision of worlds would transform a death sentence into the most unexpected love story, one born from a clinical arrangement, but destined to heal what medicine couldn't touch. Alexander Hawthorne sat in the sterile office of Dr. James Whitfield, the words echoing in his mind like a death knell. 3 years, possibly less. The condition is degenerative, and I'm afraid, terminal. The doctor's voice was clinical, detached in the way only someone who regularly delivered death sentences could be. At 42, Alexander had built Hawthorne Industries into a global empire. He'd survived hostile takeovers, economic crashes, and corporate espionage. Yet here he was, being defeated by his own body. There are treatments that may extend your comfort, but I must be honest, there is no cure, Dr. Whitfield continued, sliding a folder across his mahogany desk. Alexander nodded, his expression betraying nothing of the storm raging inside him. I understand. Send all records to my private office. Beside him, Sebastian Hawthorne, his half-brother and CFO, placed a hand on Alexander's shoulder. We'll get other opinions, Alex. The best specialists in the world. Alexander caught the subtle shift in Sebastian's tone, the barely concealed anticipation beneath the concern. They shared a father, but little else. Where Alexander was methodical and restrained, Sebastian was impulsive and hungry for power. Now, with Alexander's impending death, the company's future hung in delicate balance. Of course, Alexander replied, standing to shake the doctor's hand. Thank you for your candor, Dr. Whitfield. Later that evening, Alexander stood in the grand ballroom of Hawthorne London, their flagship hotel. The annual charity gala continued around him, a symphony of wealth and privilege that now seemed hollow. 3 years. What legacy would he leave? What mark had he truly made? Champagne, sir? A waiter approached. No. Scotch, neat. Alexander turned, colliding with a young woman carrying a tray of wine glasses. Time seemed to slow as the crimson liquid arched through the air, splashing across his custom Tom Ford suit. The ballroom fell silent, all eyes drawn to the catastrophe. I am so sorry. The waitress's eyes widened in horror, her face draining of color. I didn't see you turn. Alexander should have been angry. On any other day, he might have been. Instead, he found himself captivated by the most extraordinary pair of green eyes he'd ever seen. Vibrant, defiant, and currently filled with mortification. It's just a suit, he heard himself say, surprising everyone, including himself. Relief flooded her face, followed immediately by suspicion. I can pay for the cleaning, she offered. Though they both knew a month of her salary wouldn't cover the cost. That won't be necessary. Alexander found himself unable to look away from her. She was beautiful, yes, but it was something else, a quiet dignity despite her obvious embarrassment. Your name? Isla Bennett. She straightened her shoulders, meeting his gaze directly. Well, Miss Bennett, I believe you owe me a conversation instead of a cleaning bill. Sebastian appeared at his side, eyebrows raised. Alex, the mayor is waiting to speak with you. Tell him I'll be there shortly. Alexander didn't look away from Isla. 10 minutes in the garden terrace. I insist. When she arrived at the terrace, Alexander had already changed into a fresh jacket kept at the hotel for emergencies. You came, he observed. Did I have a choice? You're my employer, technically. Her honesty was refreshing. Everyone has choices, Miss Bennett. I'm simply glad you made this one. Their conversation flowed with surprising ease. Isla was 28, educated but struggling. She worked 3 jobs, waitressing, tutoring, and weekend shifts at a bookshop. No parents. But a 17-year-old sister she was raising alone. Emma's brilliant, Isla said, her face softening. She's been accepted to Cambridge for next year, but the scholarships won't cover everything. Alexander found himself drawn to her unpretentious determination. For the first time since leaving the doctor's office, he wasn't thinking about dying. The next morning, Alexander did something unprecedented. He had his security team run a background check on Isla Bennett. The report confirmed everything she'd told him, plus more. Excellent academic record at University College London. Parents deceased in a car accident 4 years ago. Legal guardian to Emma Bennett. Multiple jobs, but still struggling with mounting debts from her parents' medical bills and funeral costs. Alexander stared at the file, an idea forming. One that would solve his most pressing concern, and hers as well. With 3 years left, he needed an heir. Hawthorne Industries couldn't fall to Sebastian. His half-brother would dismantle everything Alexander had built. It was unorthodox. Some would call it cold. But Alexander hadn't built his empire by following convention. He picked up the phone. Mrs. Reynolds, please contact Isla Bennett. I'd like to meet with her tomorrow at the penthouse. Regarding the incident last night, sir. No, Alexander replied, looking out at the London skyline. Regarding a business proposition. Isla stood in the private elevator, ascending to the penthouse of 1 Hyde Park, the most expensive residential building in London. The text message had been cryptic. Mr. Hawthorne requests your presence to discuss a matter of mutual benefit. Car will collect you at 2 p.m. She'd assumed she was being fired. Why else would the CEO of Hawthorne Industries summon a waitress who'd spilled wine on him? The elevator doors opened directly into a stunning penthouse with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Hyde Park. Alexander Hawthorne stood by the windows, his silhouette sharp against the afternoon light. Miss Bennett, thank you for coming. He turned, gesturing to a seating area. Please sit. Isla perched on the edge of an elegant sofa that probably cost more than her annual rent. If this is about last night, I truly am sorry about your suit. This isn't about the wine. Alexander sat opposite her. I have a proposition for you. He poured 2 glasses of water, his movements precise. I'll be direct. I'm dying, Miss Bennett. I have approximately 3 years left. Isla's breath caught. I'm sorry I didn't. No one knows except my doctor, my half-brother, and now you. His expression remained impassive. I need an heir before I die, and I need someone I can trust to be the mother. Isla stared at him, certain she'd misheard. I'm sorry, what? I'm proposing marriage, Miss Bennett. A contractual arrangement. You provide me with an heir, and in return, I provide financial security for you and your sister, complete coverage of Emma's education, a generous monthly allowance, and after my death, a trust fund for both you and our child. Isla stood abruptly. This is insane. You don't even know me. I know enough. You're intelligent, responsible, and devoted to your sister. You have no criminal record, excellent academic credentials, and you're not motivated solely by money. Otherwise, you'd have threatened a lawsuit over last night's incident. You investigated me. Isla felt a surge of indignation. Of course. I investigate everyone I consider doing business with. This isn't biz, Mr. Hawthorne. You're talking about marriage and a child. Alexander's expression didn't change. In my position, everything is business, even this. Why me? Surely there are women in your social circle who jump at this opportunity. Precisely why I can't trust them. They want my name, my wealth, my company. You want none of those things. You just want security for your sister. Isla shook her head. This is too much. I need to go. Consider it at least. My lawyers will draw up papers protecting your interests. He handed her a card. My private number. Think about Emma's future. Isla left the penthouse in a daze. The proposition was outrageous, offensive even. Yet as she returned to her cramped apartment in Brixton, she found the card still clutched in her hand. 3 days later, Emma came home in tears. The partial scholarship to Cambridge had fallen through. Without it, university was impossible. That night, Isla called the number. When she returned to the penthouse, Alexander had a contract prepared. The terms were generous. £5 million in a trust for Emma, a monthly allowance of £20,000 for Isla, and a £50 million trust for their child. After Alexander's death, Isla would receive a widow's pension of £1 million annually. You've thought of everything, she said, scanning the document. I'm a businessman, Miss Bennett. Thoroughness is essential. Isla set down the papers. I have conditions of my own. Alexander raised an eyebrow. Such as? First, I finish my master's degree. Second, I want a position at Hawthorne Industries, a real one, not a courtesy title. Third, I won't be a silent wife. If we're presenting this as a real marriage, I expect to be treated as your equal partner in public. Alexander studied her, something like respect flickering in his eyes. Anything else? Yes, I want time. We try for a child after 6 months of marriage. Not immediately. I need to adjust to all of this. 4 months, he countered. 5, she insisted. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. Very well. 5 months. They shook hands, the agreement sealed without romance or sentiment. Just 2 people making a practical arrangement. When would you like the ceremony? Alexander asked. As soon as possible. Emma's tuition deposit is due in 3 weeks. Alexander nodded. I'll arrange everything. We'll be married by next Friday. As Isla prepared to leave, Alexander called after her. One more thing, Miss Bennett. She turned. Yes. From now on, you should call me Alex. We are to be married, after all. Alex, she repeated, testing the name. And you should call me Isla. They regarded each other across the penthouse. 2 strangers about to become the most intimate of partners, bound by contract rather than love. The civil ceremony took place in a private room at Chelsea Town Hall, with only Emma, Sebastian, and Alexander's personal assistant, Mrs. Reynolds, as witnesses. Isla wore a simple cream suit she'd purchased with the advance Alexander had provided. No white gown, no flowers, no romantic vows, just efficient legal proceedings followed by signatures on documents. Sebastian's handshake was cold, his smile not reaching his eyes. Welcome to the family, Isla. What a fortunate turn of events for you. Thank you, Sebastian. I look forward to getting to know you better, Isla replied, recognizing the thinly veiled hostility. Emma, meanwhile, was wide-eyed at the sudden change in their circumstances. At 17, she was perceptive enough to understand this wasn't a love match. But Alexander had been surprisingly warm toward her. Your sister tells me you're interested in biomedical engineering, he'd said during their brief introduction. Emma had nodded, surprised at his knowledge. I've arranged for you to meet with our R&D director at Hawthorne Medical. She started at Cambridge, too. That simple gesture had won Emma over, though she later whispered to Isla. This is crazy. You know that, right? It's practical, Isla had responded, not meeting her sister's eyes. After the ceremony, Alexander escorted Isla and Emma to their new home, his penthouse, now theirs. Emma would have her own suite until she left for university in the autumn. I've had the West Wing prepared for you, Alexander told Isla as the elevator ascended. You'll have your own bedroom, bathroom, and sitting room. Separate bedrooms? Emma asked before Isla could stop her. Alexander's expression remained neutral. For now, we've only just met after all. The penthouse had been subtly transformed. Isla's suite was decorated in soft blues and creams, with a desk for her studies and bookshelves already filled with volumes in her preferred genres: contemporary fiction, historical biographies, and psychology texts. Alexander had clearly been thorough in his research. That evening, after Emma had retreated to her room to video chat with friends about her sudden change in address, Isla found Alexander in his study. Thank you for making Emma feel welcome, she said from the doorway. He looked up from his laptop. She's part of our arrangement. Her comfort matters. Still, you didn't have to arrange that meeting at Hawthorne Medical. It was no trouble. Besides, we should nurture talent when we find it. He closed his laptop. Tomorrow morning, Mrs. Reynolds will help you select appropriate attire for your new position. My position? Junior Development Director for the Hawthorne Foundation. You'll oversee our educational initiatives. Your background in education makes you qualified, and the foundation board reports to me. So there won't be questions about nepotism. Isla was surprised. You're actually giving me real responsibilities. You asked for a real position. I don't do things halfway, Isla. The following weeks were a whirlwind of adaptation. Isla learned to navigate Alexander's world: charity galas, business dinners, board meetings where she sat quietly observing. She studied the company, read financial reports, and absorbed everything she could about Hawthorne Industries. Alexander, for his part, maintained a respectful distance. They developed a routine. Breakfast together, discussing the day ahead. occasional dinners when schedules aligned, and weekly updates on their respective work. It was cordial, professional, and utterly devoid of romance. Emma thrived in their new environment. Her university preparations accelerated with private tutoring, and she blossomed with the removal of financial stress. She left for Cambridge earlier than expected, for a summer preparatory program Alexander had arranged. "You've given her everything I couldn't," Isla told Alexander the night after dropping Emma at university. "You gave her what matters most, stability and love. I merely provided resources." It was the most personal conversation they'd had in weeks. 6 weeks into their marriage, Alexander invited Isla to attend a crucial board meeting. "Sebastian will be presenting his quarterly report. I want you there." The boardroom fell silent when they entered together. Sebastian's surprise quickly morphed into something darker when Alexander guided Isla to the seat at his right hand, traditionally reserved for the CFO. "Before we begin," Alexander announced, "I want to formally introduce my wife to the board. Isla will be attending meetings regularly from now on, as my partner in all things. She should understand every aspect of Hawthorne Industries." Sebastian's knuckles whitened around his pen. "How progressive of you, Alex. Though I wonder if board meetings are the best use of Isla's time, given her limited business experience. My wife's perspective is valuable precisely because it's different from ours," Alexander replied smoothly. "Fresh eyes see opportunities we might miss." The meeting proceeded with Sebastian presenting growth projections that Isla immediately recognized as overly optimistic. When he finished, she asked, "Have these projections been stress-tested against the potential economic downturn economists are forecasting for next quarter?" A heavy silence followed. Sebastian hadn't accounted for this, and everyone knew it. "An excellent question," Alexander said, the barest hint of approval in his voice. "Sebastian, perhaps you could rework these numbers before our next meeting." That evening, Alexander found Isla in the library. "You impressed the board today." Sebastian wasn't impressed. He looked ready to throw me out the window. "Sebastian sees you as a threat. He assumed he would inherit everything after my death. And now," Alexander's expression hardened, "now he knows that won't happen. Today I informed the board of my succession plans. In the event of my death, you will hold my voting shares in trust for our child, with a governing board to assist until the child comes of age." "Sebastian won't accept that quietly," Isla observed. "No," Alexander agreed. "He won't." Their eyes met in shared understanding. For the first time, Isla felt truly aligned with her husband, partners in a complex game with high stakes. What surprised her most was how natural it felt. Standing beside this man she'd married for convenience, facing an uncertain future together. 4 months into their marriage, Alexander and Isla traveled to New York for the opening of the newest Hawthorne hotel. It was their first overnight trip together, and despite separate rooms, the intimacy of travel created a different dynamic between them. After a successful opening gala, they returned to their suite. Alexander loosened his tie, pouring 2 glasses of whiskey. "You handled the investors beautifully," handing her a glass. "The Stevensons are notoriously difficult to impress." Isla smiled, kicking off her heels. "Mrs. Stevenson just wanted someone to acknowledge her charity work. Mr. Stevenson wanted to believe the hotel was his idea all along. People are surprisingly simple sometimes. Is that how you see me? Simple?" The question hung between them, more personal than any they'd shared before. Isla considered him. "No, you're many things, Alex, but simple isn't one of them." He moved to the window, looking out at the Manhattan skyline. "In 3 days, I have another appointment with Dr. Whitfield. The disease should be progressing according to his timeline." It was the first time he'd mentioned his condition since their wedding. Isla set down her glass, moving to stand beside him. "Are you in pain?" "Not yet. That comes later." His voice was steady, but Isla caught the subtle tension in his jaw. "The final stages will be undignified." "I'll be there," she said simply. Alexander turned to her, surprise evident in his expression. "That's not part of our arrangement. I'm your wife, legally and in public perception. I won't abandon you when things get difficult." Something shifted in Alexander's eyes. Vulnerability. breaking through his carefully maintained control. I've never feared death, Isla, but I find I'm afraid of how I'll die. Weak, dependent, everything I've never been. Without thinking, Isla reached for his hand. It was the first time they'd touched beyond the perfunctory contact of public appearances. His fingers were warm, strong, closing around hers with gentle pressure. You won't be alone, she promised. Alexander's gaze dropped to their joined hands, then to her lips. The air between them changed, charged with something neither had anticipated. Slowly, deliberately, he leaned forward. Their first kiss was tentative, a question rather than a demand. When Isla didn't pull away, Alexander deepened the kiss, his hand coming up to cradle her face with surprising tenderness. When they separated, both were breathing unevenly. This wasn't in the contract, Isla whispered. No, Alexander agreed, his voice rough. It wasn't. That night changed everything. They crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed, discovering a physical compatibility that matched their growing intellectual connection. Neither spoke of love. It remained a business arrangement expanded to include desire. But something fundamental had shifted. Back in London, they moved Isla's things into the master suite. Their public relationship remained unchanged, but privately, they developed a new intimacy, discussing business over breakfast in bed, Alexander reading reports, while Isla studied for her master's program, their bodies casually touching in domestic comfort. 6 weeks after New York, Isla sat on the edge of the bathtub, staring at the pregnancy test in her hand. 2 pink lines, clear and undeniable. Alexander found her still sitting there 20 minutes later. Isla, concern colored his voice. Are you ill? Wordlessly, she held up the test. Alexander went completely still, his eyes fixed on the small plastic indicator. You're pregnant, he stated, his voice carefully neutral. Yes. How do you feel about that? The question surprised her. In their original agreement, her feelings hadn't been a consideration. She would provide an heir. That was the arrangement. Yet here he was, asking what she felt. I'm not sure yet, she answered honestly, but not unhappy. Alexander knelt before her, taking her hands in his. I know this began as a business arrangement, but I find myself. He paused, searching for words. I find myself grateful that it's you, that the mother of my child is someone I've come to respect, to care for. It wasn't a declaration of love, but from Alexander Hawthorne, it was perhaps the closest equivalent. As the pregnancy progressed, their relationship continued to evolve. Alexander attended every doctor's appointment, his face revealing nothing to the medical staff, but his hand gripping Isla's. With barely contained emotion, when they heard the heartbeat for the first time. At home, he became unexpectedly attentive, ensuring her comfort, modifying his schedule to be present, even reading pregnancy books, when he thought she wouldn't notice. For a man who had approached marriage as a business transaction, his transformation was remarkable. In her 5th month, Isla accompanied Alexander to his quarterly appointment with Dr. Whitfield. She waited in the reception area, flipping through magazines without really seeing them. When Alexander emerged, his expression was grim. The disease is progressing as expected, he told her in the car. The medication should control symptoms for another year then. He didn't finish the sentence. That night, unable to sleep, Isla went to make tea. Passing Dr. Whitfield's office, she overheard 2 nurses speaking in low voices. Poor Mr. Hawthorne. Such a shame about his condition. I know. Dr. Whitfield says it's progressing exactly as predicted. Almost too perfectly, if you ask me. What do you mean? Nothing really. Just that in 15 years of oncology nursing, I've never seen a case follow the textbook progression so precisely. It's unusual. Isla froze, teacup halfway to her lips. Something cold settled in her stomach. Not fear, but the first inkling of suspicion. Isla couldn't shake the nurse's conversation from her mind. For days, she debated whether to voice her concerns to Alexander. But what if she was wrong? What if she gave him false hope only to have it crushed? Instead, she made an appointment with Dr. Nisha Patel, a renowned specialist in Greenwich, with no connections to Harley Street or the Hawthorne Medical Network. She brought copies of Alexander's medical records, which she'd accessed through his home office. Mrs. Hawthorne, Dr. Patel said after reviewing the files. I understand your concern. But may I ask why you're seeking a second opinion? Without your husband's knowledge. Isla hesitated. Something doesn't feel right. The disease is progressing exactly as predicted. No deviations. No unexpected responses to treatment. Is that normal? Dr. Patel frowned, turning back to the scans and blood work. It's certainly unusual. Most conditions have some variability. May I keep these overnight? I'd like to examine them more thoroughly. 2 days later, Dr. Patel called Isla to her office. I've reviewed everything, and I've consulted with colleagues. Her expression was grave. Mrs. Hawthorne, these results appear to have been manipulated. Isla felt the room tilt. Manipulated, you mean? The progression markers have been artificially adjusted to create a linear decline. The original blood work shows abnormalities, yes, but not consistent with terminal illness. Someone with sophisticated medical knowledge has altered these results. Are you saying Alexander isn't dying? Based on these records, I cannot confirm a terminal diagnosis. I would need to examine him personally, run new tests. Isla's mind raced. If Alexander wasn't dying, who would benefit from making him believe he was? The answer came immediately. Sebastian. With Alexander believing he had limited time, Sebastian could position himself for power, perhaps even influence succession planning, but she needed proof. Accusations against Sebastian would require irrefutable evidence through the Hawthorne Foundation's security contacts. Isla discreetly hired Tom Ward, a former MI6 investigator who specialized in corporate fraud. She provided him with Dr. Patel's findings and Sebastian's financial records, which she accessed through her position at the foundation. Look for connections between Sebastian and Dr. Whitfield, she instructed. Financial transactions, properties, offshore accounts, anything linking them, while Tom investigated. Isla maintained her normal routine with Alexander, the secret weighing heavily on her. His condition appeared to worsen, fatigue, occasional pain. But now she wondered if these symptoms were psychosomatic, his body responding to what his mind believed was happening. 3 weeks later, Tom requested an urgent meeting at a small cafe in Notting Hill. I found something, he said, sliding a folder across the table. Dr. Whitfield received 4 payments of £250,000, each to offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands. The money was routed through 3 shell companies before reaching him. And these companies connect to Sebastian. Tom nodded. The final shell company, Meridian Holdings, lists Sebastian's university roommate as director, but the beneficial owner is Sebastian himself, hidden behind layers of corporate structure. That's the financial connection. What about the medical evidence? I managed to access Dr. Whitfield's private server. He kept 2 sets of records for Alexander, the real results and the manipulated ones he presented. The real tests show some abnormalities, but nothing terminal. More consistent with a treatable condition that would require ongoing management. Isla felt sick. So Alexander has been living with a death sentence that doesn't exist. Exactly. And there's more. I found correspondence between Sebastian and Whitfield, dating back 18 months. They planned this carefully. Isla took the evidence, her mind working through the implications. Sebastian had orchestrated an elaborate deception, convincing Alexander he was dying to manipulate him during a vulnerable time. The cruelty of it was breathtaking. What will you do? Tom asked. I need to tell Alexander, but first, I need to understand why. Why would Sebastian do this? Follow the money, Tom advised. Always follow the money. That evening, Isla accessed Alexander's private corporate server using the password she'd seen him enter countless times. She traced through board minutes, succession planning documents, and financial projections. The picture emerged clearly. If Alexander died without an heir, Sebastian would gain controlling interest in Hawthorne Industries. With Alexander believing he had limited time, Sebastian could position himself as the natural successor, while subtly undermining Alexander's confidence in his own decision-making. What Sebastian hadn't anticipated was Isla, and more specifically, her pregnancy. The child changed everything, disrupting Sebastian's carefully laid plans. Isla sat back, overwhelmed by the magnitude of the deception. How would Alexander react to learning his brother had fabricated his terminal diagnosis? The betrayal would be devastating. She placed a protective hand over her growing belly. This child, conceived as part of a business arrangement, had unwittingly become the center of a corporate power struggle, and Isla, brought into the Hawthorne family as a convenient solution to a manufactured problem, now held the truth that could shatter everything Alexander believed about his remaining time. The question wasn't just whether to tell him, but how and when. With the board meeting approaching where Sebastian would present his quarterly update, Isla made her decision. It was time to expose the truth, whatever the consequences. The quarterly board meeting was scheduled for 9 a.m. on Thursday. Isla arranged for Tom Ward to be waiting outside the boardroom, evidence in hand. She hadn't told Alexander anything. A decision that weighed on her conscience, but one she believed necessary. She needed Sebastian to reveal himself. As board members filed in, Isla took her seat beside Alexander, her heart pounding. Sebastian entered last, nodding coolly in their direction before taking his place at the opposite end of the table. "Before we begin," Alexander said, "I'd like to update the board on my health situation." He glanced at Isla, squeezing her hand under the table. "As you know, my condition continues to progress. Dr. Whitfield confirms. I have approximately 18 months remaining. In light of this, I've finalized succession plans. My child will inherit my controlling interest, with Isla serving as trustee until our child reaches maturity." Sebastian's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. A wise precaution, though perhaps premature. "There are promising treatments being developed, which would extend my life by months, not years," Alexander interrupted. "We must be realistic." Isla took a deep breath. "Actually, I believe we need to reevaluate that timeline entirely." Alexander turned to her, confusion evident in his expression. "Isla, I apologize for the interruption, but there's something the board needs to hear." She pressed the intercom. "Please send in Mr. Ward." Tom entered carrying a leather portfolio. Sebastian straightened, eyes narrowing. "Who is this?" he demanded. "Tom Ward, private investigator," Isla answered. "Mr. Ward, please share your findings with the board." Tom distributed folders to each member. "These documents contain evidence of a sophisticated medical fraud perpetrated against Mr. Alexander Hawthorne. His terminal diagnosis was fabricated. His test results manipulated to create the appearance of a progressive, fatal condition." The boardroom erupted in murmurs. Alexander sat motionless, his face expressionless as he opened the folder. "This is absurd," Sebastian snapped. "Who authorized this investigation?" "I did," Isla replied calmly, after overhearing medical staff discussing inconsistencies in Alexander's case. Alexander slowly turned the pages, examining the evidence, the dual medical records, the financial transactions linking Sebastian to Dr. Whitfield, the timeline of their correspondence. "Dr. Patel, one of London's leading diagnosticians, has reviewed the original, unaltered test results," Tom continued. "She confirms that while Mr. Hawthorne does have a medical condition requiring management, it is not terminal. With proper treatment, he can expect a normal lifespan." Alexander finally looked up, his eyes finding Sebastian across the table. "Is this true?" His voice was deadly quiet. Sebastian's face flushed. "This is a ridiculous accusation. Your wife clearly has ulterior motives." "The evidence is quite conclusive, Mr. Hawthorne," Tom interrupted. "The financial trail connecting you to Dr. Whitfield is particularly damning. 4 payments of £250,000 each, routed through shell companies, ultimately controlled by you. You made me believe I was dying." Alexander's voice was hollow. "My own brother." Sebastian's composure cracked. "You were never going to step aside. 20 years I've worked beside you, and you still treated me like a subordinate. I deserved more. So you sentenced me to death." Alexander's control finally broke, his fist slamming onto the table. "You watched me plan for a death that wasn't coming, manipulated my decisions, my future." "I created an opportunity," Sebastian shouted. "Without the diagnosis, would you have ever considered an heir? Would you have stepped back enough to see the company needs new leadership? You're too controlling, too rigid in your vision." The board members sat in stunned silence as the brothers confronted each other. "Mr. Sebastian Hawthorne," Tom interjected, I should inform you that the Metropolitan Police have been notified. Medical fraud of this magnitude is a serious criminal offense. Dr. Whitfield is already being questioned. Sebastian's face drained of color. You can't prove intent. The email correspondence between you and Dr. Whitfield quite clearly establishes intent, Tom replied. You specifically requested a condition with a 3-year prognosis, long enough for you to position yourself for succession, but short enough to create urgency. Alexander stood, his composure regained, though his hands trembled slightly. This meeting is adjourned. The board will reconvene tomorrow to discuss leadership restructuring. He turned to Sebastian. You will surrender your company credentials immediately. Security will escort you from the building. As security arrived to remove Sebastian, he looked directly at Isla. This isn't over. That child may not even be his. How convenient that you got pregnant so quickly. Alexander stepped between them. That's enough. Don't compound your crimes with slander. After Sebastian was removed, the board members departed, leaving Alexander and Isla alone in the boardroom. The silence stretched between them. How long have you known? He finally asked. 3 weeks. I needed irrefutable evidence before coming to you. Alexander nodded, moving to the window. I'm not dying. No, you have a manageable condition, autoimmune according to Dr. Patel. With proper treatment, you should live a normal lifespan. He turned to her, his expression unreadable. Our entire marriage is based on a lie. Isla felt her heart constrict. The circumstances that brought us together were based on a lie. The marriage itself is what we've made it. A business arrangement with an expiration date that no longer exists. Is that all it is to you now? She asked quietly. Before he could answer, his phone rang. The Metropolitan Police requesting his presence for a formal statement. The personal conversation would have to wait. In the following days, the scandal unfolded publicly. Dr. Whitfield surrendered his medical license and faced criminal charges. Sebastian was arrested for fraud and conspiracy. Alexander cooperated fully with authorities, while simultaneously restructuring Hawthorne Industries' leadership. Through it all, he and Isla maintained a united front publicly. But privately, the question of their future hung between them, unresolved and increasingly urgent. A month after Sebastian's arrest, Isla stood in their bedroom, packing her clothes. Alexander had been distant, immersed in company restructuring and legal proceedings. They still shared a bed, but little else. The intimacy between them fractured by the revelation that the foundation of their marriage had been built on Sebastian's deception. Alexander found her folding sweaters into a suitcase. What are you doing? I think it's best if I move into the guest suite until we decide how to proceed. Isla didn't look up. Our arrangement was predicated on your limited time. That's no longer the case. Alexander was silent for so long that Isla finally turned to face him. His expression was one she'd never seen before. Vulnerable, uncertain. Is that what you want? He asked quietly. I want. Isla hesitated. I want you to be free to make decisions without the pressure of a false deadline. If you want to dissolve our marriage after the baby comes, I'll understand. Alexander crossed the room, taking the sweater from her hands and setting it aside. When I received that diagnosis, I thought I was facing the end. Instead, it became a beginning. He took her hands in his. I married you for practical reasons, yes, but somewhere along the way, practicality became something else entirely. Isla's heart quickened. What are you saying, Alex? I'm saying that what began as convenience has become the most real thing in my life. His voice roughened. I'm saying that the thought of you leaving terrifies me more than any diagnosis ever could. But our agreement. To hell with our agreement. For the first time since she'd known him, Alexander Hawthorne looked completely unguarded. I love you, Isla. Not because of our arrangement, not because of the child you're carrying, but because of who you are. The woman who challenges me in board meetings, who saw through Sebastian's deception when I couldn't, who makes me laugh when no one else can. Tears filled Isla's eyes. I never expected this, any of it. Neither did I. He gently placed a hand on her swollen belly. I thought I was planning for the end of my life. Instead, I found its true beginning. I love you too, she whispered. The words she'd held back for months finally breaking free. I've been afraid to admit it, even to myself. It seemed too complicated, too unlikely. The best things usually are. Alexander drew her into his arms, holding her as if she were infinitely precious. Stay. Not because of our contract, but because we're building something worth keeping. 3 months later, in the private wing of London's Portland Hospital, Isla gave birth to their daughter, Charlotte Emma Hawthorne. Alexander never left her side, his composure finally breaking when he held his daughter for the first time. "She's perfect," he whispered, a tear sliding down his cheek. "Like her mother." 1 year later, the Hawthorne family celebrated Charlotte's first birthday at their country estate in the Cotswolds. Sebastian had been sentenced to 8 years for fraud and conspiracy. Hawthorne Industries was thriving under Alexander's continued leadership, with Isla now serving as director of the expanded Hawthorne Foundation. As evening fell, Alexander found Isla on the terrace, watching the sunset over the rolling hills. "Any regrets?" he asked, slipping his arms around her waist. Isla leaned back against him. "Not one. Though our story will be interesting to explain to Charlotte someday." Alexander smiled against her hair. "We'll tell her the truth, that sometimes the greatest blessings come disguised as endings, and that her father was dying until her mother gave him a reason to truly live."